I want to do better than that. I want to give you some geography, and I want to use the Bible. Hebrews 13:8. What we're going to do tonight is we're actually going to work through about half of this chapter, and I want to do it a little bit exegetical style, where we just work some of the verses as we work our way in. And there's a theme that the author of Hebrews is trying to land on as he or she finishes the writing of this book. I say this because we're not at all positive about who wrote the book of Hebrews, and we've speculated about 1,000 people, but that's for another night. Verse 8, one of the most famous verses in the New Testament. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's top 10 most famous verses in the New Testament. It gets quoted all the time. Not a lot of people realize it's Hebrews 13:8, but when we say Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever, this is where it is in the Bible, and this is its lone spot, by the way. Notice it's not God that's declared to be the same yesterday, today, and forever. I'm not insinuating God is not the same, but it's not biblical to say God is the same. What we see is that Jesus Christ shows us an image of the Father that is universal and never changes. So whatever you saw in Jesus in Matthew, and then you see in resurrected Jesus in Acts, and then you see through the message of Paul in Ephesians and Corinthians, that's the same Jesus in this room. That's the same Jesus in 10,000 years. The same yesterday, today, and forever. And because of that, do not be carried about with various and strange doctrines. Already at the midpoint of the first century, we were starting to get various and strange doctrines in regards to Jesus. And one of the most famous that would last nearly 200 years in the church was Jesus wasn't a real person. He didn't have a real body. Therefore, this whole crucifixion, resurrection stuff's made up. This is a fantasy. And so early on, the church has to start to combat that by eyewitness testimony and go, you can say he wasn't real, I saw him. It's why John opens his little letter with, we touched him, we heard him, we saw him, he was real. And so forget the various and strange doctrines. Instead, land here. It is good that the heart be established by grace, not with foods which have profited those who've been not profited those who've been occupied by them. And so you can choose, and the author here chooses to juxtapose grace with natural stuff like food and drink, because in a Hebrew culture, food and drink was the mark of whether you were a real Jew or not. We don't have those such restrictions in Christianity, but they had them in Judaism. And so the author says, look, Jesus Christ, the same Jesus we walked with is the same Jesus today, will be the same Jesus tomorrow. What I want you to establish yourself in is the grace of God, the goodness of God, the favor of God, the love of God, versus all these intangibles and stuff you can touch and fight about. And this is a message that needs repreached in the church over and over again. Is listen, folks, your hearts today can be established in God's goodness and God's grace and God's love for you, or your heart can be established in all the stuff you do. You get to choose that. By the way, choose wisely. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So go all the way back to Jesus and figure out which one he was impressed with. And that's the one you ought to be impressed with. And therefore the message can become grace, my heart established, not the other thing.